His mouth hovered a breath from her collarbone, close enough that she felt the furnace of his exhale scorch her skin, close enough that the ink crawling up his throat, serpentine dragons coiling over corded muscle, seemed to writhe with every ragged pull of air. Amara's fingers trembled against the bare landscape of his chest, tracing the ridged topography of scars no camera had ever captured, no fan had ever glimpsed, no magazine spread had ever airbrushed into oblivion. And God, the way he looked at her. Those dark, wrecked eyes half-lidded, pupils blown wide with a hunger that had nothing to do with fame and everything to do with the woman who dared to see him unravel. Made her knees go liquid, made her pulse hammer a filthy, desperate rhythm against her wrists. He was soul's untouchable God, and he was on his knees for her. The world knew him as Yoon Jun-ho, 28 years old, lead vocalist and visual center of Eclipse, the 7-member boy group that had shattered every streaming record from Gangnam to Grammy nominations. His face plastered billboards in Times Square, his smile sold out luxury fashion houses in under 90 seconds. His choreography videos accumulated 2 billion views before the algorithm could even categorize them. To 43 million subscribers, he was porcelain perfection, the jawline that could cut glass, the shoulders that filled out Saint Laurent like they'd been sculpted by Renaissance masters, the voice that made grown women weep in concert halls from Seoul to Sao Paulo. What the world did not see, what the carefully constructed mythology of Yoon Jun-ho deliberately buried beneath layers of foundation and long-sleeved performance wear, was the ink. Not the delicate, marketable tattoos that other idols flaunted for brand deals. No, Jun-ho's skin told a violent, beautiful, unapologetic story. A full sleeve of blackwork on his left arm, thorned roses bleeding into geometric sacred patterns that wrapped from wrist to deltoid. A sprawling koi fish in deep indigo and crimson scaling up his right ribcage, its tail disappearing beneath his collarbone. Script in Old Hangul tracing his spine. A phoenix in ash gray and gold erupting across his entire back, wings spanning shoulder blade to shoulder blade. And beneath all that artistry, beneath the deliberate beauty of the ink, the scars. Thin, silvery, parallel lines on his inner forearms. A jagged crescent across his left shoulder blade. A constellation of small, puckered marks along his lower ribs that he'd never explain and no one had ever been permitted to ask about. Amara Osei had not come to Seoul to fall into the orbit of a god. 23, born in Brixton, raised between her Ghanaian mother's kitchen and the chaotic backstage energy of London Fashion Week, where she'd interned since she was 19. She had a portfolio that made veteran stylists jealous. Editorial spreads in ID, a collaboration with a rising Nigerian designer that had gone viral across 3 continents, and a reputation for making fabric behave like liquid poetry on any body it touched. When Eclipse's management company, Halustar Entertainment, had headhunted her for a 6-month contract as their new international image consultant and personal stylist, she'd nearly laughed. K-pop was not her world. But the money was extraordinary, the creative freedom unprecedented. And honestly, she wanted to prove that a black British woman could walk into the most image-obsessed industry on the planet and make them see fashion as art rather than armor. Her first week was a masterclass in controlled chaos. 7 young men with 7 different body types, 7 different insecurities, 7 different management handlers breathing down her neck about hemlines and color palettes. She navigated it with the calm precision of a surgeon, pinning and draping and adjusting while translators scrambled to keep up with her rapid-fire London cadence. She was good, undeniably, magnetically good, and she noticed, with the sharp eye of someone who dressed 100 bodies before, that Yoon Jun-ho flinched. Not visibly, not in a way the cameras or his 6 bandmates would clock. But when she reached to adjust the collar of his rehearsal shirt, his shoulders locked. When she knelt to pin a trouser hem, his breathing shifted shallow, controlled, the breathing of a man holding a door shut against a howling wind. He wore long sleeves in July, high collars under stage lights that hit 40 degrees, gloves during fittings, and his management team, a rotating cast of 4 handlers who shadowed him like Secret Service, positioned themselves between Amara and their charge with a vigilance that struck her as excessive even by idol industry standards. It happened on a Thursday. Unremarkable. A fitting session in the basement studio of Halustar's Gangnam headquarters, scheduled for 11 p.m., after Eclipse's final rehearsal for their comeback showcase. The other 6 members had already been fitted and dismissed. Junho was last, as always, his schedule carved into 15-minute increments by a management team that treated his time like plutonium. Amara was alone in the studio, organizing fabric swatches, when the door opened and he walked in without his usual escort. No manager, no handler, no translator, just Junho in a loose white rehearsal tee, sweat darkened at the chest, his hair damp and falling over his forehead in dark, heavy strands. He looked exhausted. He looked, for the first time since she'd arrived, like a 28-year-old man rather than a brand. "Ms. Osei," he said. His English was careful, accented, but fluent. He'd studied in Vancouver for 2 years before debut. "They said you would be here." "Fits at 11:30, she confirmed, not looking up from a bolt of charcoal wool. "You're early." "I know." He didn't move toward the fitting platform. He stood by the door, one hand still on the handle, as if retreat remained a live option. "I wanted to ask you something, before they come back." Now she looked up, and what she saw in his expression, the raw, unguarded terror warring with something fiercer, something that looked almost like relief, made her set down the fabric. "Okay," she said softly. "Ask." He pulled the rehearsal tee over his head in one swift motion, and Amara's professional composure, the armor she'd worn through every fitting, every backstage crisis, every demanding creative director, cracked clean down the center. Because there they were, the scars, not hidden beneath foundation or long sleeves or strategic camera angles. Silver white and raised against warm brown skin, mapping a history of pain across his forearms, his ribs, the curve of his shoulder. And the tattoos, God, the tattoos, alive and breathing and so much more intricate and personal than any promotional photo had captured. The koi on his ribs seemed to swim with his breathing. The thorned roses on his left arm looked like they'd grown there, organic and inevitable, wrapping around muscle that shifted and flexed as he stood before her, vulnerable and magnificent and terrified. "I need you to design the comeback stage costumes," he said, his voice rough. "All 7, but mine specifically. I need you to see this." He gestured at his own skin, the ink, the scars, all of it. "So you understand what you're covering. And what you're not." Amara's throat went dry. Her fingers itched to reach out, to trace the raised silver lines, to follow the indigo scales of the koi up toward his collarbone. She did not. She was a professional. She was 23 and he was a global phenomenon, and there were 4 managers who would materialize within minutes. But the air between them had changed, thickened, charged with something electric and unnamed that made the fluorescent studio lights feel too bright, too clinical, too inadequate for the intimacy of this moment. "I see you," she said. 3 words. Simple. But the way her voice dropped, the way her dark eyes held his without flinching, without pity, without the performative shock he'd clearly braced for. It undid something in his chest that had been knotted tight for 6 years. He exhaled, a full, shuddering release like a man surfacing after being held underwater. And then the door banged open and Manager Park swept in with 2 assistants and a garment bag, and the moment shattered, and Junho was the idol again, and Amara was the stylist, and the scars disappeared back beneath carefully chosen fabric. But something had shifted. A thread had been pulled, and neither of them could push it back. If this story is already making your heart race the way it's making mine pound just writing it, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button on AMBW Romance Stories right now. Because what happens between Amara and Junho over the next weeks is going to ruin you for every other love story you've ever watched. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss a single beat. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever seen someone and just known, in your bones, that your life was about to split into before and after? Because that's exactly where we are. And trust me, you want to be here for what comes next. The first risky behavior manifested 9 days later. Eclipse had a scheduled appearance on a variety show, 3 hours of live broadcast, a guaranteed ratings spike, a contractual obligation that Hallustar had negotiated 18 months in advance. Junho was supposed to be there. Instead, at 4 p.m., his manager received a text. Asterisk fitting with Ms. Osei. Reschedule the broadcast. Asterisk no explanation. No apology. No precedent. In 6 years of idle life, Yoon Jun-ho had never missed a scheduled appearance. Not for illness. Not for injury. Not for the panic attacks that had hospitalized him twice and been buried under NDAs so thick they could stop a bullet. He went where he was told, when he was told, smiling that million-dollar smile while his inside screamed. But today, he'd looked at his calendar, seen the 3-hour block labeled Variety Show, KBS, and felt the walls closing in. And then he'd looked at the smaller block beneath it. Costume fitting, Studio B, 6 p.m. Say. And something in his chest had unclenched. Just the thought of her hands adjusting a seam, her voice murmuring measurements, her dark eyes focused on the architecture of his body with professional intensity and zero judgment. It was oxygen. It was the only room in his suffocating life where the air wasn't recycled through filters of public expectation. He canceled the broadcast. Manager Park nearly had an aneurysm. The network threatened legal action. Halustar's stock price dipped 2% in after-hours trading. And Jun-ho sat in Studio B at 6 p.m., watching Amara pin a hem on a pair of tailored trousers, and felt, for the first time in years, like he could breathe without performing the act of breathing. "You didn't have to do that," Amara said, not looking up from her work. Her fingers were steady, precise, tucking excess fabric with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this since she was 16 and stealing her mother's sewing machine. "The broadcast. I know. They're furious, Jun-ho. I know that too." He was sitting on the edge of the fitting platform, shirtless again. They'd established this rhythm, this unspoken agreement that the costumes required direct contact with his skin, that the tattoos and scars were part of the design language now, not secrets to be buried. The koi on his ribs flexed as he breathed. The thorned roses caught the warm studio light. "I couldn't go. I tried. I was in the car. And all I could think was that I'd rather be here, with you, in this room, where I don't have to be him." Amara's pins paused. She looked up. He was watching her with an intensity that made her stomach drop. Not the polished, camera-ready gaze of Yoon Jun-ho the idol, but something rawer, more desperate, more dangerously honest. Like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to step back or lean forward. "You can't keep doing this," she said gently. "Canceling appearances, pushing them away. They'll replace me, Jun-ho. They'll decide I'm a bad influence and ship me back to London on a red-eye. Then I'll go with you." He said it so simply, so without irony or performance, that it hit her like a physical blow. "I'll leave the group. I'll leave the company. I don't care. I can't go back to not being seen. I can't go back to the long sleeves and the foundation and the handlers who look at me like I'm a product with a defect." His jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck corded. "You saw me. The first person in 6 years who saw all of it and didn't flinch. Didn't call a meeting. Didn't draft a wellness protocol. You just said I see you, and I can't. I won't lose that." The obsession didn't announce itself with trumpets. Crept in like fog. At first, it was the fittings, extended from 30 minutes to 2 hours, then 3, then entire afternoons where Amara would drape fabric over his shoulders and he would talk. Not about music or choreography or brand deals. About the years before debut. The training facility that broke him down and rebuilt him as a product. The night at 19 when the pressure became a physical weight on his chest and he'd taken a blade to his own skin just to feel something that wasn't the suffocating numbness of perfection. The scars he'd earned in silence, hidden under long sleeves while the world applauded his smile. The tattoos he'd gotten in secret, in a back alley parlor in Hongdae at 3 a.m., each one a reclamation. "This body is mine. This skin is mine. This pain made something beautiful and I will not apologize for it." Amara listened. She pinned and draped and measured and listened. And slowly, without either of them naming it, she became the axis around which his stability rotated. His managers noticed first. The texts went unanswered. The scheduled therapy sessions, the ones Halustar mandated and monitored, were skipped. "I'm with Amara," he'd say, as if her name were a shield, a prescription, a cure. Asterisk, "I don't need Dr. Yoon this week. I'm with Amara. She's enough." Asterisk. And God help her, she was becoming enough. Not by choice. Not by design. but because the way he looked at her, like she was the only fixed point in a spinning universe, like her presence was the difference between breathing and drowning, it rewired something in her chest. She'd come to Seoul to style costumes, to build a portfolio, to prove herself in an industry that wasn't built for women who looked like her. She had not come to be a man's oxygen. But here she was, at midnight in a Gangnam studio, his head bowed over her hands as she adjusted a cufflink, his breath warm against her knuckles, his whispered thank you carrying the weight of a prayer. The second cancellation came 2 weeks later. A magazine cover shoot, Vogue Korea, the September issue, a 6-figure contract. Junho walked off set 40 minutes in because the photographer asked him to remove his shirt for a vulnerability spread and the handler present hadn't cleared it. He drove himself, no manager, no security, a violation of 17 contractual clauses, to Studio B, where Amara was sketching costume designs. He walked in, dropped his keys on her cutting table and said, "Stay with me tonight, please. I can't be in that apartment alone. The walls talk. They say I'm ungrateful. They say I'm broken. They say no one will want me if they see what's under the ink." He said it flatly, clinically, like reading a diagnosis. But his hands were shaking. The dragons on his throat writhed with his pulse. Amara set down her pencil, crossed the studio, and did the only thing that made sense. She took his shaking hands in hers, steadied them, held them. His fingers were long, calloused from years of guitar strings and choreography grips, and they closed around hers like a man catching a rope over a void. She didn't say it'll be okay. She didn't say you're not broken. She said, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere tonight. And the walls can talk all they want. I'm louder." He laughed, a real laugh, startled out of him, ugly and ungraceful and nothing like the polished chuckle he gave interviewers. And then he pulled her into his chest, buried his face in the crown of her head, and held on. The koi on his ribs pressed against her shoulder. The thorned roses on his arm bracketed her back. She could feel every scar through the thin cotton of his shirt, could feel the topography of his survival mapped against her skin. And she held him back, held him while his breathing steadied, held him while the midnight Seoul traffic hummed beyond the studio windows, held him while something between them crossed a threshold that neither could uncross. By the 5th week, the architecture of his life had been quietly, irrevocably restructured around her. His longtime manager of 6 years, Manager Park, was reassigned to another artist. Junho had requested it personally, calmly, in a meeting where Hallustar's CEO sat with his mouth slightly open. "I need fewer people," Junho had said. "I need less noise. Amara handles my image, my costumes, my schedule. I don't need 4 handlers. I need one person who sees me as a human being and not a revenue stream." The CEO had sputtered. Legal had been summoned. Contracts had been waived. And Junho had sat in his chair, tattooed arms crossed over his chest, jaw set, and said, "Fire me if you want. I'll walk. But I'm not going back to the machine." They didn't fire him. You don't fire the face of a group generating $300 million annually. They compromised. They seethed. They watched. And Amara Osei, 23-year-old stylist from Brixton, found herself at the center of a gravitational field she hadn't asked to enter, holding the orbit of a man the world worshipped but no one had ever simply held. The tension in the studio changed after that, became something thicker, more charged, saturated with a wanting that neither voiced but both felt like a bruise beneath the skin. When she measured his inseam, his breath caught. When she adjusted the drape of a jacket across his shoulders, her fingertips lingered on the ink of his collarbone a half-second too long. When he watched her work, hunched over her sketchpad, her natural hair pulled up in a messy bun, reading glasses perched on her nose, her lips moving silently as she calculated fabric yardage. His gaze went dark and heavy and fixed, the gaze of a man memorizing a painting he believed would be taken from him. And Amara felt it, felt the weight of his attention like a hand at the small of her back, like a mouth at her throat, like a question she wasn't ready to answer but couldn't stop hearing. She was terrified, not of him, never of him, of the magnitude of what he needed from her, of the way his stability had become a thread tied to her wrist, And if she pulled away, if she stumbled, if she proved human and fallible and not the saint he'd built her into, the thread would snap. And she didn't know how to catch a man who'd been falling for 6 years. She didn't know how to be someone's entire sky when she was still figuring out her own ground. But then he'd look at her, across the studio, mid-conversation with a seamstress or a fabric supplier. He'd look at her with those dark, ink-framed eyes, and the look would say, "You are the first true thing in a world of performances. You are the only person who touched my scars and called them beautiful. I will burn every contract, every expectation, every carefully constructed lie to keep you in my orbit. Because without you, I am the machine again. And the machine is already dead." And she'd look back. And she'd stay. The 6th week brought the first public crack. A fan account posted a paparazzi photo. Junho leaving Hallustar headquarters at 2 a.m. No security detail, no manager. Walking beside a tall black woman in an oversized denim jacket, her hand tucked into the crook of his elbow. The caption read, "Who is SHE? Yoon Junho spotted with unknown woman after midnight. No staff present. Is Eclipse's golden boy in trouble?" The photo went viral within hours. 14,000 retweets. 30,000 comments. Fan forums erupted. Hallustar's PR team went into emergency lockdown. And Junho, sitting in Amara's small apartment in Itaewon, scrolling through the chaos on his phone, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Not panic. Relief. "Let them talk," he said, setting the phone face down on her kitchen counter. She was making jollof rice, her mother's recipe, the one that made the whole apartment smell like smoked peppers and home. He was leaning against the counter in a tank top, the full sleeve of thorned roses on display, the koi peeking above his waistband. His hair was unstyled, falling soft over his forehead. He looked young. He looked free. "Let them wonder. Let them speculate. I don't care if they know your name. I don't care if they know you're the only person who keeps me breathing. Junho. I mean it, Amara." He crossed the small kitchen in 2 strides. His hands found her waist, steadying her as she stirred the pot. His chin dropped to her shoulder. His lips brushed the curve of her neck. Not a kiss, not quite, but the ghost of one, the promise of one, the question of one. "I'm done hiding. I'm done performing. I'm done being the golden boy in the long sleeves. You saw me, all of me, the ink, the scars, the ugly, broken, terrified parts. And you stayed. You stayed. And I will not pretend that doesn't make you the most important person in my life. I will not pretend I can go back to a world where you're just the stylist. You're not. You haven't been for weeks. You're the reason I wake up and don't feel like I'm performing the act of being alive." Amara's spoon stilled in the pot. Her heart was a caged bird throwing itself against her ribs. She could feel the heat of him against her back, the solid wall of his chest, the rapid drum of his pulse where his throat pressed against her shoulder. The dragons on his neck shifted as he swallowed. His arms tightened around her waist. His breath came warm and uneven against her skin. "Then don't pretend," she whispered, and turned in his arms, and looked up into the face that 43 million people worshipped from a distance, and saw only a man. A terrified, beautiful, tattooed, scarred man who needed her not as a fan, not as a handler, not as a brand manager, but as a witness, as a truth, as the woman who'd looked at his broken places and said, "I see you," and meant it with her whole chest. He kissed her forehead, slow, reverent, like pressing his lips to a prayer, and then her temple, and then the corner of her mouth, barely, a whisper of contact that made them both shatter and rebuild in the same breath. And the jollof rice burned, and neither of them cared. And outside, Seoul glittered and hummed and speculated, and inside that small Itaewon kitchen, 2 people who had no business being each other's salvation decided, in the quiet and the steam and the smell of smoked peppers, that they were going to be anyway. The descent wasn't a fall. It was a choosing. Step by step, day by day, Yoon Junho chose Amara Osei over the machine that had built him. And the machine noticed. And the machine was not kind to those who walked away. The machine struck back on a Tuesday. Amara was in the middle of draping a structured blazer, charcoal wool, asymmetric lapel, designed to showcase the phoenix across Junho's back while keeping the forearm scars concealed under tailored sleeves. When her phone buzzed. Then again. Then a continuous, angry vibration that rattled against her cutting table like a trapped wasp. She glanced down. 47 messages. 12 missed calls. 3 emails from Hallustar's legal department, each more curt than the last. And 1 text from her agent in London. Amara. Call me. Now. They're pulling your visa sponsorship. You have 72 hours. She read it twice. The words didn't rearrange themselves. 72 hours. The contract that had brought her to Seoul, the visa that allowed her to exist in this country, the legal architecture that kept her in the same city as the man currently standing 3 feet away with his arms raised while she pinned a shoulder seam, all of it evaporating. Because she'd been seen. Because a paparazzi lens had captured her hand in the crook of his elbow at 2 in the morning. Because the machine had decided she was a contaminant, a variable, a threat to the carefully calibrated mythology of Yoon Junho, and the machine did not tolerate threats. Your face changed, Junho said. Not a question. His arms were still raised, the blazer half-pinned, the koi on his ribs stretching with his breath. But his eyes, those dark, perceptive eyes that could read a room of 10,000 screaming fans and find the one person crying in the back row, locked onto hers with surgical precision. What did they say? It's not Amara. Her name in his mouth was a blade wrapped in silk. Low, certain, non-negotiable. What did they say? She set down the pins, stepped back, crossed her arms over her chest like armor. They're pulling my visa. 72 hours. Legal sent 3 emails. My agent in London says the sponsorship is being revoked effective Thursday. She kept her voice flat, professional. The voice she used when a creative director trashed her work at 3 a.m. and expected a smile. I'll need to pack. Book a flight. The blazer's nearly done. I can leave notes for whoever takes over the... No. Junho, you can't just... I said no. He dropped his arms. The half-pinned blazer slipped off one shoulder, revealing the full sweep of the thorned rose sleeve, the ink dark and vivid against his skin. He crossed the studio floor in 3 strides, closing the distance she'd put between them, and took her face in his hands. His palms were warm, rough-padded, framing her jaw with a tenderness that made her throat ache. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. His forehead dropped to hers. Their breath mingled, hot and tangled. You are not leaving. You are not getting on a plane. You are not disappearing back to London because a corporation decided your existence inconveniences their quarterly earnings. Do you hear me? I hear you. I also hear immigration law, Junho. I hear a contract with a termination clause. I hear a visa tied to an employer who wants me gone. Then I'll buy the company. He said it without hyperbole, without performance. The same tone he'd used to order coffee. I'll buy Hallustar. I'll buy the building. I'll buy the visa office. I don't care. You're not leaving. You can't buy a government immigration department. Watch me. His jaw set, the muscles in his neck corded, the dragons on his throat flexing. I have savings they don't know about. Accounts my mother set up before debut, before the contracts, before they owned every yen I earned. I have enough to fund an independent visa petition. A work visa. Not tied to them. Tied to you. Your own consultancy. Your own name. Your own terms. His thumbs stroked her cheekbones again. Slower this time. A caress disguised as reassurance. You came here to prove you could walk into this industry and make them see you. I won't let them unsee you. I can't. Amara closed her eyes. His hands were still on her face. His breath was still on her lips. The studio was silent except for the hum of the industrial sewing machine in the corner and the distant thump of bass from a practice room 3 floors up. She could feel the topography of his palms, the calluses, the slight scar across his left thumb from a guitar string accident years ago, the warmth of him seeping into her skin like sunlight through glass. And beneath her closed lids, she saw it clearly. The life she'd planned. London. Portfolio. Independence. A career built on her own name, in her own city, on her own terms. And the life that was blooming here, uninvited, unstoppable, rooted in the soil of a man's desperate, beautiful need. A man who looked at her like she was the first honest thing he'd ever touched. 72 hours, she whispered. I'll have the petition filed in 48. His voice was rough, certain. The voice of a man who had spent 6 years being told where to stand, what to wear, when to smile, and had finally found the one thing he would not be managed out of. I have a lawyer, not theirs, my mother's cousin. He handled my visa when I was in Vancouver. He'll handle yours. And if it doesn't work, then I go with you. He pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, sleepless, fierce. I'll resign from Eclipse, publicly, on camera. I'll walk out of the contract and let them sue me into the ground. I don't care. I'll follow you to London, to Accra, to the bloody moon. I will not be in a city where you are not. You'd leave them, the group, the fans, everything you built. I didn't build it. They built it. They built me, poured me into a mold and called it art and sold tickets to the exhibition. His hands slid from her face to her shoulders, gripping, anchoring. You're the first thing I chose, the first thing that's mine. And I will burn the whole exhibition down before I let them take you from me. The words hit her like a wave, warm, overwhelming, terrifying in their magnitude. No one had ever chosen her like this. Not with this ferocity. Not with this willingness to detonate their own life just to keep her in the blast radius. It was too much. It was exactly enough. It was the most terrifying and the most intoxicating thing she'd ever felt. This being wanted not for her portfolio or her eye for color or her ability to make fabric sing, but for the simple, radical act of having looked at a man's scars and refused to look away. She kissed him. Not his forehead. Not his temple. Not the corner of his mouth. She kissed him properly, fully, with both hands fisted in the front of his tank top and her mouth pressed hard against his, and her whole body leaning into the solid, inked, scarred wall of him. He made a sound low, wrecked, a groan that vibrated through his chest and into her palms. His arms locked around her, crushing her against him. The koi on his ribs pressing into her sternum, the thorned roses bracketing her spine. His mouth moved against hers with a desperation that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with a man who'd been starving for 6 years and had finally been handed something real. His tongue traced her lower lip. Her fingers dragged up his chest, over the ridged scars, over the smooth planes of muscle, into the damp hair at his nape. He tasted like green tea and sleeplessness and the faint salt of sweat from rehearsal. She tasted like the smoked peppers from the jollof she'd been making an hour ago and the chapstick she'd applied that morning and something uniquely, irrevocably her. They broke apart gasping. His forehead dropped to her shoulder. Her hands were still in his hair. The blazer lay forgotten on the floor, half-pinned, abandoned. 48 hours, she breathed into his hair. 48, he confirmed. And then, softer, almost inaudible, stay. I'm staying. The next 2 days were a controlled detonation. Junho's personal lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Choi Min-seo who operated out of a cramped office in Jongno and owed nothing to Halustar, filed an independent work visa petition under Amara's name, a freelance costume design consultancy, self-sponsored, legally airtight. While that processed, Junho did something that made manager Park's successor, a nervous young man named Director Yim, nearly swallow his own tongue. He walked into Halustar's 32nd floor boardroom, sat at the head of the table uninvited, and said, Ms. Osei's contract is being extended, indefinitely, under her own terms, her own rates, her own schedule, and any attempt to revoke her visa, terminate her employment, or remove her from my professional orbit will be met with my immediate, public, irreversible resignation from Eclipse. I will hold a press conference. I will name names. I will show them the scars. He rolled up his sleeves as he said it. Slowly, deliberately, the thorned roses, the silver lines beneath. The boardroom went silent. 7 executives stared at the ink and the damage and the quiet, lethal certainty in his eyes. Are we understood? They were understood. But the machine, even wounded, had teeth. The paparazzi photo had metastasized. Fan forums dissected Amara's identity with forensic cruelty. Asterisk, who is this woman? Why is she with him? She's not Korean. She's not industry. She's nobody. She's using him. She's a distraction. She's a phase. She's a threat to the group's image. Asterisk, the comments were a tidal wave of xenophobia and possessiveness. 43 million people defending their ownership of a man they'd never met. Amara's Instagram, a modest account with 8,000 followers, mostly fashion students and fellow stylists, was found and flooded. Death threats, racial slurs, messages so vile she deleted the app and didn't reopen it for 3 days. Junho found out on the second night. He'd come to her apartment after a rehearsal that had run 4 hours overtime, still in his practice clothes, sweat damp and exhausted, the phoenix on his back visible through the thin white tee. He found her on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, phone dark and face down on the coffee table. She hadn't cooked, hadn't changed out of her work clothes, hadn't turned on the lights. The apartment was dark except for the Seoul skyline bleeding gold and violet through the windows. He didn't ask what was wrong. He knew. He'd seen the forums. Director Yim had shown him, apologetically, as if the information were a wound he was obligated to clean. Junho had read every comment, every slur, every threat, and something in his chest had gone cold and still and very, very quiet. The quiet before a storm. The quiet of a man deciding exactly how much of his carefully guarded life he was willing to set on fire. He sat beside her on the couch, didn't speak, just pulled her into his side, tucked her head under his chin, wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The koi on his ribs pressed against her temple. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, slow, deliberate, an anchor in the dark. "I want to post," he said after a long silence. His voice was low, rough, threaded with a fury he was keeping leashed by his teeth. "I want to post a photo, you and me, your hand in mine, your name, your face. I want to tell them who you are, what you are to me. I want to say this woman is mine and she is not nobody and she is not a phase, and if you come for her, you come for me, and I will not be quiet anymore." Amara lifted her head, looked at him. In the dim light, his tattoos were shadows and suggestions. The dragons on his throat, the roses on his arm, the script on his spine glimpsed where his T had ridden up. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were burning. "They'll destroy you," she said. "The contracts, the group, the fans. 6 years of work. 6 years of being a puppet." His free hand came up, cupped the back of her neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin below her ear. 6 years of smiling while they stitched my mouth shut. 6 years of hiding these. He gestured at his arms. The scars, the ink, all of it. Under long sleeves and foundation, and please don't look too closely. He's fragile, he's a product. Handle with care. "I'm done, Amara. I'm done being handled. I want to be seen. By them, by everyone. With you beside me. With my sleeves rolled up and my scars on display and your hand in mine and my name next to yours. I want them to know that Yoon Junho is not a brand. He's a man. A man with ink and damage and a woman he loves who makes jollof rice that sets off the smoke alarm." The word loves landed between them like a stone in still water. He hadn't said it before. Not in those terms. Not with that weight. Amara felt it hit her sternum. Felt it ripple outward through every carefully constructed wall she'd built around her heart. A woman he loves. Not a stylist. Not a consultant. Not a visa complication. A woman he loved. "You don't have to burn it all down for me," she whispered. "I'm not burning it for you. I'm burning it for me. For the 19-year-old kid who carved his own skin because no one would let him say I'm not okay. For the 20-year-old who got his first tattoo in a Hongdae basement at 3 a.m. because it was the only part of his body they hadn't contractually owned. For the 28-year-old man sitting on this couch who finally has something that isn't a performance." His hand tightened on her neck. Gentle, possessive, reverent. "You didn't cause this, Amara. You just made me stop pretending I wasn't already burning." She kissed him again. Slower this time. Deeper. Her hands mapped the ink on his arms, tracing the thorned roses, the geometric patterns, the small scar on his thumb. His hands found her waist, her hips, the curve of her spine through her blouse. His mouth moved to her jaw, her throat, the pulse point below her ear where her heartbeat hammered a frantic, willing rhythm. She tilted her head, giving him access, and his lips pressed there, open, warm, lingering, while his teeth grazed the sensitive skin and a sound escaped her that was half gasp, half plea. His hand slid up her spine, fingers threading into the hair at her nape, tilting her head further, deepening the angle. The koi on his ribs flexed against her palm where she'd pressed it flat to his chest. The phoenix on his back shifted as he arched into her. Every scar, every line of ink, every ridge of damaged skin was a sentence in a story she was learning to read with her hands and her mouth and the desperate, aching press of her body against his. They didn't go further. Not that night. The world was too loud, too close, too hungry. But they stayed tangled on the couch, his legs draped over hers, her head on his chest, his fingers drawing idle patterns on her arm while the Seoul skyline pulsed beyond the glass. And in the morning, the visa petition was approved. 46 hours. 2 hours ahead of his promise. Amara Osei was staying. And if you're sitting there with your hand over your mouth, heart absolutely wrecked, needing to know what happens when Junho actually posts that photo, when the world finds out, when the machine comes for them with everything it has, then you need to hit that like button right now. Share this with every person who's ever loved someone the world told them they couldn't have, and subscribe to AMBW Romance Stories because the next chapter is going to crack you wide open. Drop a comment and tell me. Would you burn it all down for the person who saw your scars and called them beautiful? Because Junho already has. And the fire is spreading. The photo went live on a Friday. Not on Eclipse's official account. Not through Hallustar's PR machine. On Junho's personal Instagram, the one with 22 million followers, the one he'd never posted anything more personal than a blurry studio selfie or a promotional teaser. A single image. His hand, tattooed and scarred. The thorned roses vivid. The silver lines visible. And hers, nestled in his, her dark fingers laced through his. Her nails painted a chipped burgundy from a home manicure 3 days prior. No faces. No names. Just the caption. Asterisk she saw me. All of me. And she stayed. Her name is Amara. She is not nobody. She is not a phase. She is the reason I stopped performing and started living. If you love me, love her. If you can't, unfollow. I won't be a puppet anymore. JH. Asterisk. The internet detonated. 22 million notifications in 11 minutes. Hallustar's stock plunged 9% before the market closed. Eclipse's 6 other members were flooded with questions they couldn't answer. Director Yim called Junho 14 times. He didn't answer. He was in Amara's kitchen, making kimchi jjigae from a YouTube tutorial, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, the scars and the roses on full display, humming off-key while she laughed at him from the counter and stole pieces of tofu from the pot. His phone buzzed endlessly on the counter. He ignored it. He stirred the pot. He kissed her temple when she walked past. He was, for the first time in his adult life, simply a man in a kitchen, making dinner for the woman he loved, while the world burned outside the window. And the world did burn. The fan base fractured. Half rallied, he's human, he's allowed to love, she's beautiful, they're perfect, we support him. The other half raged. She's manipulating him. She's a foreigner. She's destroying the group. She's the reason he's unstable. She needs to go. Hallustar issued a carefully worded statement. Asterisk Yoon Junho's personal life is his own. Eclipse remains committed to its fans and its upcoming world tour. Asterisk the statement satisfied no one. The machine was wounded, confused, recalculating. And in the recalculating it grew dangerous. Director Yim requested a meeting. Not in the boardroom. In a private room at a Gangnam hotel, neutral ground, no lawyers, no handlers. Just Yim, Junho, and Amara. They sat across from each other at a lacquered table, and Yim slid a folder across the surface. Inside, a revised contract. Eclipse's world tour. 18 months. 47 cities. Junho's presence mandatory. And a new clause, Highlighted in yellow, personal relationships deemed detrimental to group image may be subject to management review and intervention. They want a leash, Amara said flatly, reading the clause. Her voice was calm. The calm of a woman who'd navigated London's fashion industry, who'd been the only black woman in every room she'd entered since she was 19, who'd been told no so many times it had lost its power to wound. They want control, Junho corrected. He didn't touch the folder. His arms were crossed, the roses and the scars on display, his jaw working. They want the right to decide who I love, who I see, who I let into my life. They want the machine back. And if you refuse? Yim asked. He was young, barely 30, and he looked like a man delivering a terminal diagnosis to a friend. The tour is contractually obligated. Sponsors are locked. Venues are booked. If you walk, the penalties are. I know what the penalties are. Junho's voice was ice. I've read the contract. Every clause. Every penalty. Every NDAs they buried me under at 19. He leaned forward. The phoenix on his back shifted beneath his shirt. The dragons on his throat flexed. Here's what's going to happen, Director Yim. I'm doing the tour. All 47 cities. Because the other 6 members deserve that. Because the fans who supported us before the machine got its claws in deserve that. But the clause goes. The review goes. The intervention goes. Amara travels with me. Not as staff. Not as a contracted stylist. As my partner. My person. My choice. And if Halustar has a problem with that, they can take it up with my lawyer. And my 22 million followers. And the scars I'm very, very tired of hiding. Yim stared at him. Then at Amara. Then at the folder. He closed it. Slid it back. I'll relay your terms, he said quietly. And then, softer, almost off the record. For what it's worth, the photo, the caption. Half the office cried. Including me. He stood, bowed, left. Amara exhaled. Junho reached across the table and took her hand. Laced their fingers together. The thorned roses against her burgundy nails. The scars against her smooth skin. The ink and the damage and the beauty, all of it intertwined. 18 months, she said. 47 cities. 47 cities, he confirmed. With you. With me. He lifted their joined hands to his mouth. Pressed his lips to her knuckles. Slow. Deliberate. A vow without words. And outside the hotel window, Seoul glittered and seethed and speculated. And the machine ground its gears and recalculated. And somewhere in a Gangnam basement studio, a half-pinned charcoal blazer still lay on the floor, abandoned, waiting for a fitting that would never come. Because the man it was made for had walked out of the costume and into the light. Sleeveless, scarred, tattooed, free, and holding the hand of the woman who'd made it possible. The tour would come. The world would watch. And Yoon Junho would stand on stages from Seoul to Sao Paulo, from London to Lagos, with his sleeves rolled up and his ink on display and his woman in the wings, and he would sing, and for the first time in 6 years the song would be his own. The first night of the world tour was in Seoul. Olympic gymnastics arena. 18,000 screaming voices. A stage built like a cathedral of light and sound. 7 platforms rising from the floor like altars. And at the center of it all, Yoon Junho in a costume Amara had designed with her own hands over 4 sleepless weeks. Charcoal wool, asymmetric lapel. The back panel cut low and open to reveal the full sweep of the phoenix in ash gray and gold. Wings spanning his shoulder blades, tail disappearing beneath the waistband. The sleeves were 3/4 length. Not full, not long, 3/4. Enough to show the thorned roses from wrist to elbow. Enough to show the silver scars beneath. Enough to say asterisk I am here. All of me, look or don't look. I am no longer asking permission. Asterisk. Amara stood in the wings. Stage left. Behind a curtain of black velvet. Invisible to the audience. Visible only to the road crew and the 6 other members waiting for their cues. She wore all black. A fitted turtleneck, tailored trousers. Her hair loose and falling past her shoulders in dark, heavy waves. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Because in 90 seconds, the lights would hit him, and 18,000 people would see the ink, and the scars, and the man beneath the mythology, and the world would either embrace him or devour him. And she would be here, in the wings, his person, his witness, his truth. He found her before the opening number, slipped behind the curtain while the other 6 ran vocal warm-ups with their monitors. He was already in full stage makeup, subtle, enhancing, not masking. His hair was styled, swept back from his forehead, the dragons on his throat fully visible. He looked like a god. He looked like a man. He looked terrified. "Hey," he said, just that, one word. But his voice cracked on it just slightly, just enough. "Hey." She reached up, adjusted his collar, smoothed a non-existent wrinkle on his shoulder. Her fingers lingered on the ink at his collarbone, tracing the edge of the koi's tail where it disappeared beneath the fabric. "You look extraordinary. I feel like I'm going to be sick." "You won't be." "What if they hate it? The sleeves, the scars. What if they see me and they won't?" She cupped his face, both hands, thumbs on his cheekbones. The same gesture he'd given her in the studio, weeks ago, a lifetime ago, when the visa letter had landed and the world had tried to pull her away. "They will see you, and some will love you more for it, and some will walk away, and that is their right. But you will not be performing anymore, Junho. You will be singing. There's a difference, and they will hear it, they will feel it, and the ones who matter will stay." He closed his eyes, leaned into her palms. His breath shuddered out, warm against her wrists. The dragons on his throat stilled. The tension in his shoulders released, vertebra by vertebra, like a structure being carefully, lovingly dismantled. "You'll be here," he said. "Not a question. A need. A tether. Every city. Every night. In the wings. Where you can see me if you look left." He opened his eyes, looked at her, and then he kissed her. Not desperate, not wrecked, not the starving collision of that first night in her kitchen. Slow, deep, certain. A kiss that tasted like a promise kept, like a debt paid, like a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side holding the hand of the woman who'd lit the match and said, "Burn with me. I'll be in the flames too." His hands found her waist, pulled her flush against him, the phoenix on his back pressing between her shoulder blades, the koi on his ribs warm against her sternum. Her fingers threaded into his styled hair, ruining it, not caring. His mouth moved against hers with a reverence that made her knees go soft, made her pulse sing, made the distant roar of 18,000 fans fade to a hum beneath the thunder of their own breathing. They broke apart, foreheads together. His thumb traced her lower lip. Her thumb traced the scar on his. "Go," she whispered. "Go sing your song." He went. The lights hit him like a physical force. 18,000 voices erupted. A wall of sound. A tidal wave of adoration and curiosity and hunger. And there he stood, center stage, sleeves rolled, ink blazing, scars visible under the white-hot spots. The phoenix on his back caught the light and seemed to ignite, ash-gray and gold wings spreading across his shoulders like he was about to take flight. The thorned roses on his arm glowed crimson under the stage wash. And the scars, the thin, silver, parallel lines on his forearms. Visible, undeniable. He sang. And God, he sang. Not the polished, produced, choreographed performance of 6 years. Not the machine's output. His voice cracked on the high note in the second verse. A tiny human imperfection that would have been auto-tuned into oblivion in any other era. He let it crack. He let it break. He let the rawness bleed through, and the arena went silent for one held breath. And then the roar that came back was 10 times louder than before. Because they heard it. The truth in the fracture. The man in the machine. The scars in the song. Amara watched from the wings. Her hands were pressed flat against the velvet curtain. Her eyes were wet. Her chest ached with a pride so fierce it felt like a blade between her ribs. Because that was him. All of him. The ink and the damage and the beauty and the terror and the 28 years of surviving a world that had tried to sand him smooth. And he was singing. Not performing. Singing. And in the third row, A teenage girl was crying, holding up a hand-painted sign that read, "Asterisk, your scars are beautiful. Thank you for showing us." Asterisk. The tour lasted 18 months, 47 cities. Seoul to Tokyo to London to Lagos to Sao Paulo to New York and back again. And in every city, in every arena, in every backstage corridor and hotel room and cramped tour bus, Amara was there. In the wings, stage left, his tether, his truth, his person. And slowly, city by city, night by night, the obsession that had once been a desperate, clawing need. The need to cancel appearances, to push away handlers, to hoard her presence like oxygen. Transformed into something steadier, something that breathed. He still needed her. God, he needed her. But the need was no longer a wound. It was a root system, deep, quiet, sustaining. He could stand on a stage in Sao Paulo with 40,000 screaming fans and glance left. Find her in the wings with her arms crossed and her lips moving to the lyrics, and feel the ground beneath him hold. Not because she was fixing him. Not because she was his medication or his crutch or his secret. But because she had seen the worst of him and stayed, and that staying had given him permission to see himself and stay too. The last night was in Seoul. Full circle. The same arena. The same stage. But the man who walked it was not the man who'd walked it 18 months ago. He was leaner, harder, more certain in his body. The tattoos had grown. A new piece on his right forearm, a small compass rose in fine blackwork, inked in a parlor in Brooklyn during the North American leg. For Amara, the artist had asked. For the woman who is my north, he'd answered. The scars were still there. They would always be there. But they were no longer secrets. They were sentences. They were proof. They were the map of a country he'd survived. And he walked that country with his sleeves rolled up and his head high and his woman's hand in his. After the final encore, after the confetti and the bows and the 18,000 voices singing his name like a hymn, he walked off stage, past the crew, past the other 6 members whooping and hugging and crying, past director Yim who was openly sobbing into a handkerchief, and he walked to the wings. Stage left, where she was waiting, black turtleneck, hair loose, eyes bright, hands steady. "Hey!" he said, the same word, the same crack in his voice, but different now, lighter, free. "Hey!" she smiled. And God, that smile. The one that had undone him in a basement studio 11 months ago. The one that said, asterisk, I see you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Asterisk. He pulled her into him, crushed her against his chest, buried his face in her hair, the phoenix on his back pressed between her shoulder blades, the koi on his ribs flexed against her sternum, the thorned roses on his arm bracketed her spine, the compass on his forearm pointed, as it always did, toward her, and the scars, the silver, ridged, beautiful scars, pressed against her skin, warm, alive, "We did it," she whispered into his hair. Asterisk, you asterisk did it. He pulled back, framed her face, those dark, ink-rimmed eyes, no longer wrecked, no longer starving, but full of her, full of himself, full of a life that was finally, irrevocably his own. "You saw me, and you stayed, and you made me believe I was worth seeing. You were always worth seeing, Junho. I just turned on the light." He kissed her, right there, in the wings, in front of the road crew and the sound engineers and the 6 members who pretended very hard not to be watching. He kissed her like a man who had spent 6 years in the dark and had finally walked into the sun. Slow, deep, certain. A kiss that tasted like confetti and sweat and green tea and the smoked pepper ghost of a jollof rice recipe from Brixton. A kiss that said asterisk, I am yours. I am mine. We are ours. And no machine, no contract, no 43 million strangers will ever take this from us again. Asterisk. And in the 3rd row of the emptying arena, a teenage girl clutched her hand-painted sign to her chest and whispered to her friend, "He's happy. Look at him. He's actually happy." And her friend nodded, teary-eyed, and said, "Yeah, he is. And she's the reason." And the girl looked at the wings, at the 2 figures tangled together in the half-dark, the ink and the scars and the burgundy nails and the compass pointing north, and she said, I hope she knows. I hope she knows she saved him. But Amara didn't need to be told. She felt it in the press of his chest against hers, in the steady drum of his heartbeat under her palm, in the way his fingers laced through hers and held, not clawed, not gripped, not clutched like a man over a void, held like a man on solid ground, like a man who had built his own floor, plank by plank, scar by scar, tattoo by tattoo, and had invited her to stand on it beside him. They walked out of the arena together, hand in hand, sleeves rolled, scars visible. The soul night air hit them cool and electric, the city humming around them, alive and indifferent and beautiful. No security detail, no handler, no machine, just a man and a woman, walking home, their shadows long and tangled on the pavement, the ink on his arms catching the streetlight, the burgundy on her nails catching his. And the world, for once, could watch or look away. It no longer mattered. He was not a product. He was not a brand. He was not a golden idol in long sleeves, performing the act of being alive for 43 million strangers. He was Yoon Jun-ho, 28, tattooed, scarred, free. And the woman beside him was Amara Osei, 23, brilliant, fearless. And the story was not a cautionary tale about obsession or a tragedy about a man who lost himself in another person. It was a love story, messy, terrifying, ink-stained, scar-mapped, world-burning, machine-breaking, jollof rice-scented, Seoul to London to Lagos love story. And it was only the beginning. If this story cracked you open, if you felt every scar and every kiss and every terrifying, beautiful choice in your own chest, then do this for me and for AMBW romance stories. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, smash the like button until your thumb aches, and share this with every single person who needs to hear that their scars do not make them unlovable. Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Tell me about the person who saw your damaged places and stayed. Tell me about the night you decided to stop performing and start living. Tell me about your own Junho, your own Amara, your own wings stage left moment. Because this channel exists for you. For the love stories the world says are too messy, too loud, too scarred, too tattooed, too much to be beautiful. They are beautiful. You are beautiful. And I will keep telling these stories every single week, as long as you keep showing up. So show up, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and I will see you in the next one. This is AMBW Romance Stories. And love, real love, the ink and scars and burn jollof kind of love, always wins. Always. Good night, my beautiful people. Go love someone with your whole chest. Sleeves rolled. Scars showing. No performance. Just you. Just them. Just the truth. Till next time.